ambassadors on foreign missions by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu say no authority to incur expenditure AI to return back to the country. And National Security Advisor, NSA, Malam Nuhu Ribadu has assured Nigerians and investors that national security is improving. I am Bola Oba, and this is Plus Politics. President Bola Tinubu on September 2 recalled all Nigeria's ambassadors, both career and non-career. They were asked to return on or before 31st of October. Nigeria has no fewer than 300 foreign missions. Many ambassadors said their authority to incur expenditures, AIEs, had not been sent to facilitate their return, with impeccable sources saying that their recall date had been extended to December 31st. The ambassadors also complained of cash crunch, saying allocations had not been remitted to the mission since June. Besides, they warned that Nigeria could be subjected to avoidable international embarrassment because the recall and replacement of ambassadors take about 6 to 8 months on account of agreement, that is acceptance of envoy by the host nation after screening, which takes 6 to 8 months to be completed. The ambassadors reportedly appealed to President Bola Tinubu to extend the October 31st deadline for their recall to enable their children and wards to take their promotion exams and consequently streamline the academic calendar in order not to truncate their education by dropping a year. However, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Ambassador Yusufu Tuga, in a statement by his Special Assistant on Media and Strategic Communication, Mr. Akalis Abdul Karim, said contrary to reports, the October 1 deadline was sacrosanct and further placed embargo on the foreign missions accounts, quote, to check frivolous spending by the ambassadors, unquote. Joining us to look at this is Collins Nweke, foreign policy commentator based in Belgium. Good to have you guest on Plus Politics. Collins.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bola, for having me.
Pleasure is all ours. What do you know? What have you heard from diplomats as somebody who has functioned around major Nigerian diplomats, especially in the European sphere, or in the last 25 to about 30 years? What have you heard from some of your friends in the Nigerian diplomatic service here on this issue?
Yes, indeed. Thank you again, Bola, for having me. I mean, the news coming out of the staples of Nigeria's ambassadors out here in Europe and by extension, the Americas isn't looking very good. It doesn't sound so well. And it appears to be some sort of recurring decimal, because there is always one thing or the other, and Nigerians keep hoping, keep expecting that things will be improved, but that is obviously not the case, especially when you consider the latest policy mishap. I must describe it. Now, what is actually happening is that the usual practice, a new president, recalls ambassadors and, appoints his own people to go out, and represent him. He represents his government in different countries of the world. So that is perfectly normal. It's, a very well known and celebrated system. But there are, of course, rules around it. For instance, like you mentioned, you don't recall ambassadors in the middle of a school term, leaving their kids high and dry in terms of truncating their education. But also, when you do that, you have to be sure that you are ready to receive them back at headquarters in Nigeria, and that means that you have to make the financial provisions for them to return back together with their households. Now, what we are gathering is that after the recall, there has not been adequate preparations made. These remain allegations, while some have found one way or the other to put themselves together and return back to Nigeria. Others are stranded. And what is even worse is that not much is coming from the Nigerian side in terms of countering, media reports that we are getting. I mean, if you add that situation to conversations with some of the, affected, diplomats, then you begin to see that, yes, there is something that is unholy going on around there.
When you used the word stranded, I'm sitting here thinking, how could somebody at the ambassadorial level, who in every material particular must have been a success case before he was appointed, how could that person be stranded in a foreign land? After all, if the privileged position were to be withdrawn by the new principal, it just behoves you to come home. So the argument of being stranded, some may find it farcical or indeed intended to embarrass the new president. How would you respond to that?
Well, the facts as we have them so far are, number one, the president, the new president, exercising his, prerogatives, has recalled the ambassadors. There is no question about that, and that is in keeping with, normal protocol, because he has to appoint his own people. Now, when you do that, I mean, quite apart from the fact that the timing of the recall is questionable in terms of, doing that right at the middle of, an academic year, as opposed to, getting them to return back to Nigeria at the end of the term, which is somewhere around December, to coincide with the Christmas holidays. They are meant to return at the end of October. That is already one serious anomaly. And then the ambassadors themselves are complaining that not adequate financial preparations were made to facilitate their return back to Nigeria, to the point that they have actually written to Mr. President to extend the deadline of their return to December, and in the meantime, expecting that the resources needed, the financial resources needed to facilitate their return, will be made available. Now, none of this has happened. Now, we understand that those who have been able to return did that one way or the other through personal, resources. We also gathered that on the average, the sort of money needed for them to return is somewhere around $20,000 per ambassador. Now, when you calculate it, when you times that by 300, representatives, more or less, you get a sense of the sort of money that we're talking about. Government is claiming not to have that immediately yet. Yet, Bola, we are also aware that legislators are buying SUVs for themselves. So we do know, we are not that daft, we do know that there might be different budget posts, but there is also something called financial prioritization. Obviously, that has not happened yet.
Would you perchance know, maybe picking information from some of your friends in the diplomatic service or the ambassadorial class, especially across Europe, would you perchance know why this the incumbent foreign affairs minister, who used to be an ambassador in Germany himself, who should know the likely implication of the conditions that these people will be cast in, why is a bit gung-ho, a bit more gung-ho than the presidency in making sure that the ambassador's tenure are speedily ended.
Well, Bola, you need to understand one point, and that is the fact that the ministers serve under the pressure of the president. And so what that means essentially is that the buck stops with the president. As minister, you can advise, you can recommend, but it is up to Mr. President on whose table the buck stops to, make the final call. Now, I do not want to go into the business of speculating because I do not have the details. I'm not an insider. But the point to be made here very squarely is that when something goes wrong, as it has gone wrong in this case, the buck should not stop with the foreign minister. Was actually a serving, ambassador at the time that he was appointed, and he was, as a matter of fact, doing his second term as ambassador in Germany. So yes, one will expect that he knows the rules. One will expect that there is the sense of camaraderie between him and his, ambassador colleagues. Now, don't take this for a fact because, like I mentioned, I am not privy to the details. But I think the bottom line here, Bola, is the fact that it is Mr. President that calls the shots. And so when things go wrong, we need to trace it back to Mr. President himself. It could not have been that the foreign affairs minister gave Mr. President the advice to actually maltreat the ambassadors.
Collins,
yes, please.
What are the likely implications of this sudden withdrawal of ambassadors across the diplomatic missions across the world? What are the likely implications for Nigeria? Just talking from your experience as somebody who has lived and obnobbed with not only Nigerian ambassadors or Nigerian diplomats, but more so in Brussels, where you have gained some stature as a local politician who has also earned some profound degree of respect in the African community generally. What are the implications? Using Belgium now as an example.
Well, the implication is certainly that it doesn't help Nigeria's international image for a start. If anything, it makes Nigeria more of a laughingstock. A laughingstock in terms of, ambassadors, being seen from the point of view, Nigerian ambassadors being seen from the point of view of not necessarily commanding the respect and regards of their home government. Now, you need to understand this because some of these things, rather than talking about them in hushed tones, it is important to actually, call people out when they need to be called out. Can you imagine that in some instances, bills, electricity bills, house rents and all of that of our missions are not paid to the point that some of them are being threatened with eviction. Oftentimes, the counterpart Ministry of Foreign Affairs would have to step in to prevent all of that, from happening. And so, when all of this happens as well, yes, there is the arrangement that when there is no ambassador, you have what they call the charge d'affaires, the head of mission, that actually takes over. But there is a limit to the powers of the charge d'affaires. So what that means essentially is that certain critical diplomatic decisions would have to be put on hold until a substantive ambassador is appointed. Now, these are part of the things that, slow things down in terms of, taking Nigeria seriously. And, they don't in us as a country any respect. To the contrary, they actually make Nigeria more of a laughingstock.
And how does this specifically affect Nigerians who may want to undertake some consulate services in these foreign missions, whilst they are either as residents or transiting or visiting? What are the implications to somebody like me? If I travel out and I find myself in a situation where this kind of operational lacuna is prevalent?
Well, consular services are looked at as part of the day-to-day operations in terms of issuance of visa, in terms of passport, issuance of passport for those, whose passports have expired, or Nigerian travelers, who lost their passport and, need certificate, travel certificate, or a renewal of, or a new passport to enable them return back to Nigeria. I don't believe that as long as, there are passport booklets, that the fact that there are no ambassadors in some of these missions would mean that people will be stranded. No, I think they will continue to get those regular service. But of course, when we go further to core high-level diplomatic representations and decisions to be taken around all of that, yes, there is, there are issues, but not consular services. I don't imagine that consular services will be affected. And so individual Nigerians or travelers intending travelers to Nigeria may not be affected by the lacuna.
And one also must state that, or ask that, from your ears on the ground, is this how other African countries too treat their ambassadors, or is this kind of operational dysfunctionality or dystopia that other African countries deliberately set up for themselves in a major diplomatic post, like say Brussels, where you have the EU HQ of a sort? Is this the same thing you get to hear about other African countries?
Certainly not. Not at this level. I mean, I must say that barring this sort of issue, Nigerian ambassadors are well respected by their colleagues. The conditions of their services, the protocols and all of that, when things run well, they run excellently well, and, to the respect of their fellow African ambassadors. Now, the fellow African ambassadors may actually be operating at, a lower scale in terms of privileges and all of that than the Nigerian ambassadors. But even at that, I am not privy to a situation where their ambassadors are left high and dry. As you know, and as you mentioned, I've been out here for the better part of the last 2 decades. So what that means is that I get to, work with and interact with different African ambassadors, and they don't experience this sort of situation, even though their condition of service may be a little lower than Nigeria. So what do you prefer? A lower condition of service, but one that is consistent, or high condition of service when it lasts, but one that experiences interruptions and distortions? That is the situation as we know it today.
And the machinery of getting an ambassador fully operational in his or her country of posting is said to be something that is not done in a jiffy. That is something that takes a while, because the intelligence community of the prospective host country would work on the person's background. Apart from that, the prospective host foreign ministry would have to say, okay, this person that you are sending is okay. We're ready to accord the person all the privileges deserving of. So, in this circumstance now, it is almost looking like Nigeria's substantive ambassadorial positions across the world in the next couple of months will not be functional.
Well, that is going to be one of the fallouts of the situation that they are experiencing today. It takes an average of 6-8 months, for all the background checks and protocols and all of that are processed, on both sides. I mean, from the moment that an individual has been announced or has been assigned to a particular post. So what that means is that we are looking at, and that is the best case scenario, that things will be kick-started immediately. We're not looking at ambassadors, the new ambassadors being on post until about summer next year. So that is a long time for an embassy or a mission to stay without a substantive ambassador. We even hear of situations where an ambassador is almost at the end of his or her career, has been appointed. As we know, new ambassadors have actually been named, they've been appointed, but they still need to be assigned missions where they need to serve. Some of them, while waiting for all the protocols to be completed, actually retire because they are, it is compulsory for them to retire after the age of 60, I believe.
At the age of 60 and at 35 years of service, I guess.
Absolutely.
But having said that,
one of those can fall due, and then you have been appointed, but you don't get to actually sit in the.
But I was thinking that ambassadorship is a political appointment that actually is somewhat protected from the classical conditions of the civil service. But
not necessarily. So you have two forms of ambassadors. You have the career ambassadors, who are foreign service officers rising through the ranks to the position of ambassador. Those are the careerists, okay? And so they fall under the same terms and conditions of the civil service. But you also have the political ambassadors, that is ambassadors by appointment, who may not necessarily be career ambassadors. They may be in politics, statesmen, non-state actors, and so on and so forth. But they possess one strategic value or the other for Nigeria, for a particular country, and so where the president appoints them to such a position. So such political appointees as ambassadors are not affected by that
Okay, I get you. It's like the headship of the position of the chief of army staff or the chief of defense staff may be political appointment, but even at that, when it's time to go, if you don't go, people will see it as a gross abuse of the career conditions through which you were engaged. But just as my last question now, an average American watching this program, or a student of international diplomacy watching this program may say, you know what, you borrowed your system from America, and America is also having this kind of dysfunctionalism, not so much because the ambassadors are starved of funds or they don't get to pay rents for their missions and services, but you know what, that the partisan implication has also, look, America only had to appoint an ambassador. The American Senate only had to confirm the ambassador to Israel after the Hamas terrorist attack of Israel. And President Biden is now in the last 2.5, 3 years that wanted an ambassador, sitting in the American mission in Israel and across the world. America now has a sizable percentage of its ambassadorial positions not filled. Their own is more partisan politics, but we borrowed their system anyway. So maybe we should just get used to it. If you don't want to be messed up, don't accept ambassadorial posting. How would you? I hope I'm not sounding too cynical. I was even listening to myself, and I was feeling, well, if somebody had asked this of you, how would you have felt? But some questions must be asked, however stupid they sound.
Absolutely. Well, the point here, Bola, is that we're looking at respecting the tenets of good governance, pure and simple, okay? Whether it's in the United States or whether it's in Nigeria, when you do not respect those tenets and when you do not plan ahead, then you are planning to fail. That is essentially what this is all about. Because with a little bit more planning and a little bit less greediness on the part of politicians, they will be able to realize the importance of diplomacy and actually earmark commensurate resources to finance our foreign policy. But that appears not to be the case, and that is why you have some of these lacuna. And so one will hope that with the administration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that they would begin to work towards sorting out these inconsistencies to ensure that Nigeria repositions itself diplomatically, because when it does, it has some sort of trickle-down effect to domestic politics and the welfare of Nigerians in Nigeria.
I was picking a friend's brain, a friend who is quite vast in international politics, prior to coming on air, and he said, Bella, what do you think? This is a government that, without having all the requisite officers of state in place, the president announced he was removing subsidy. Without having all the necessary preparations, the president said he was floating the currency. And that, Bella, why are you shocked that even before having the adequate handshake and handover mechanism in place, that somebody had announced that they were withdrawing ambassadors. I don't know if you have anything to say to wrap up finally with that, but that's his opinion, I told him.
Yeah, well, honestly speaking, there have been quite a sizable number of policy somersaults on the part of President Tinubu since assuming office. Now, if I was on the phone with Mr. President, at this moment, there are just two things that I will be telling him to do. Number one is for him to be more personally involved in the decisions that are coming out of his, presidency. That's number one. And then number two, I believe that, there is a very, very critical need for him to, review his kitchen cabinet, because it cannot be that
Collins Nweke, we really have to go, Collins. I'm sorry. Time has not been, I would really want to engage you much more than this, but we have to go. Thank you very much, Collins, for taking the time. Hope it's not too cold where you are. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bola. Have a good weekend.
Wish you same. We'll go on a short break, and when we're back, we'll take on the second segment of the show.